Ready to explore a country that's like a microcosm of global politics.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Today we're diving into Nigerian politics.
Okay, I'm listening.
And get this, our main source is a Wikipedia article, Politics of Nigeria. Who knew such a treasure trove of insights existed?
All right, so what rabbit hole are we going down today?
We're talking government structures, power dynamics, the whole shebang. But hold on tight, because things get really interesting when we start peeling back the layers.
Sounds juicy. Lay it on me.
So right off the bat, the article talks about Nigeria's three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. President, Senate, House of Representatives, they even have a Supreme Court.
Yeah, very similar to many Western systems. On paper, it sounds pretty familiar.
Right. You'd think with a setup like that, things would be relatively stable. But then, bam, you stumble upon this little nugget. Nigerian senators earn a base salary of over $2,200 USD per month.
Okay, not too unusual for a government official.
Yeah, but here's the kicker. They also get a monthly expense allowance of $37,500 USD on top of that.
Whoa, hold on a second. That's a hefty sum, especially considering the economic realities for many Nigerians.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, is this system designed for balance actually working as intended? Like, is that level of compensation truly serving the people? Or is it a symptom of a much deeper issue?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to really understand what's going on today, we need to rewind a bit. Look back at how Nigeria got to where it is now. This isn't just about structures on paper, you see. It's about the weight of history.
Okay, so let's rewind. The year is 1960. Nigeria gains independence from Britain. It's got to be a pivotal moment, right? A chance to forge their own path.
Absolutely. But here's where things get interesting. While they gained independence, they didn't exactly erase the influence of their colonial past.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, Nigeria's legal system still relies heavily on English common law. You know, those centuries-old principles established in Britain. It's like trying to build a brand new skyscraper on an old foundation.
Interesting analogy.
Possible, but not without its challenges, right?
For sure. Talk about a balancing act. So they're trying to reconcile this colonial legacy with building a new democracy. Were they able to make any progress?
There were definitely periods of growth, moments where democracy seemed to take root. But then, and this is a big but, imagine this. You're trying to build trust in your government.
Yeah.
And the idea that your voice matters. And then, bam, military coups disrupt everything.
Oh, wow. I'd almost forgotten about Nigeria's history of coups.
It happened again and again throughout the late 20th century. And get this, the last one ended only in 1999.
1999, that wasn't that long ago. It's hard to even fathom that level of instability. It makes you wonder how much trust the average Nigerian has in their government after all that back and forth.
You said it, it's hard to build a stable foundation when you keep getting knocked down.
Right. So with all that in mind, how does freedom of the press look in Nigeria today? The article calls it partly free, which doesn't really give us the full picture.
Yeah, partly free is definitely a bit vague, isn't it? Like most things, it's complicated. It's not like there are no newspapers or anything, so information itself isn't completely controlled. But
Right.
let's just say that criticizing the government can be a risky move.
You mean?
Journalists have faced pressure, censorship, even arrests just for doing their jobs.
Wow. Okay, so maybe not as free as the partly free label might make it seem. Another big topic that comes up in the article is religion.
Yeah, religion plays a huge role in Nigerian society. It's a major part of life for many people.
For sure. But from what I'm reading, it also seems to be a source of political division.
Unfortunately, that's often the case. It's a bit of a global phenomenon, isn't it? Religion and politics often make for a volatile mix. Politicians might use religious rhetoric to their advantage, rally their base or discredit their opponents.
And instead of bringing people together, it ends up creating even deeper divides.
Exactly, and that kind of division can have dangerous consequences. The article specifically mentions the rise of extremist groups like Boko Haram, groups that exploit those existing tensions to justify their actions.
Right, it's a reminder that freedom and stability are things you constantly have to work at. They're fragile. Speaking of fragile, the article also mentions the impact of COVID-19 on Nigeria.
Ah, yes, the pandemic. A global stress test, if there ever was one.
It really exposed the strengths and weaknesses of, well, pretty much every system, right?
Exactly. And for a developing nation like Nigeria, which already faces so many challenges, the pandemic was particularly difficult. They had limited resources to deal with the health crisis, and the economic consequences of lockdowns were really tough on a lot of people.
Makes sense. So we've got this complex web of factors at play. Historical baggage, political maneuvering, religious tensions, economic struggles. With all this going on, who are the major players in Nigerian politics? Who's actually calling the shots?
Well, get ready for this, because Nigerian politics isn't exactly a two-party system. In fact, they have not one, not two, but 18 recognized political parties.
18. Seriously? That's wild. How do voters even wrap their heads around that?
It's definitely not easy. And to be honest, it's not really about clear-cut ideologies or anything like that. It's more about powerful figures, shifting alliances, that kind of thing. Imagine trying to keep track of 18 different parties, each with their own agendas and rivalries.
It sounds like a recipe for gridlock and confusion.
It can be. But despite all that, there are a couple of major players in this crowded field: the People's Democratic Party and the All Progressives Congress.
So even with 18 parties, it still often comes down to two main contenders.
In a way, yes. These two have dominated the political scene for a while now, each taking turns leading the country.
And have they actually delivered for the Nigerian people? Have they been able to make a difference?
That's a question for the ages. It's something that people are constantly debating. But it does raise a bigger point. What does the future hold for a country like Nigeria? With all these challenges, all this history, where do they go from here?
So where do we even begin to unpack the future of Nigerian politics? It feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
You're absolutely right. We've barely dipped our toes in the water. But I think one of the key things to watch moving forward is the role of young people.
There are a lot of young people in Nigeria, right?
Yeah, it's a very young population, and they're growing up in a world that's vastly different from the Nigeria their parents and grandparents knew. I mean, think about it. They're digital natives, highly connected, and they're not afraid to speak their minds.
So they could be a powerful force for change.
They absolutely could be. They're the ones who are going to inherit the consequences of the decisions being made today, so it makes sense that they'd be eager to shape the future. The big question is how they'll choose to engage with the political system. Will they demand more transparency, more accountability? Will they be able to overcome the cynicism and apathy that often plague Nigerian politics? Only time will tell.
It's almost like with all that energy and potential, they could either become part of the problem or a big part of the solution.
Exactly. Now, the Wikipedia article doesn't exactly offer any easy answers. It's not a crystal ball or anything. But it does highlight some interesting external factors that could play a role in Nigeria's future. For instance, it mentions the work of the Commonwealth Secretariat. Do you know much about them?
Vaguely. Remind me.
So basically, it's this group of nations, many of them former British colonies, that work together on various issues like trade, development, that kind of thing. And one of their big focuses is good governance, which includes things like promoting democracy and fighting corruption.
Okay, so how does that relate to Nigeria specifically?
Well, the Commonwealth Secretariat has actually been quite active in Nigeria, particularly when it comes to anti-corruption efforts. They're providing training to officials, helping to establish more transparent systems, that sort of thing.
So they're kind of like a supportive friend, but also one that's not afraid to call you out when you're messing up.
Yeah, something like that. It's an interesting dynamic. On the one hand, you have this external organization coming in with its own ideas and resources. But on the other hand, is that really enough to create lasting change? Can you really fix a system from the outside in? It's a question that a lot of people are grappling with.
It's that classic debate, right? Internal change versus external pressure. Which one is more effective?
And in the case of Nigeria, it's not just theoretical. It's playing out in real time with very real stakes. I mean, we're talking about a country with immense potential, but also facing some very real challenges.
It's been fascinating to dive into all of this with you today. We've talked about Nigeria's complex history, its intricate political system, and the various forces that are shaping its future.
And we've only just scratched the surface. But if there's one thing I hope listeners take away from this conversation, it's that Nigeria's story is far from over. It's a story of resilience, of struggle, and ultimately of hope.
Well said. And who knows, maybe someday we'll have to revisit this topic and see what's changed, what progress has been made. But until then, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Nigerian politics.
Anytime. It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, as always, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our world.